Australia's a country of millionaires. At least, that's what the headlines keep telling us. According to the 2026 UBS Global Wealth Report, the number of Australians with net assets worth more than 1 million US dollars has climbed to 1.6 million people, with roughly 25,000 new millionaires added in 2025 alone. Sounds incredible, right? But here's the part nobody talks about. Strip out the family home, and that number collapses. According to Finder's Wealth Building Report 2026, once you remove residential property, the average household net wealth drops from $1.63 million to just $573,250, and the millionaire count crashes right along with it. That's a loss of millions of so-called millionaires, gone, the moment you stop counting the roof over their head. So how many Australians are genuinely wealthy when their home doesn't count? And what does that mean for you? Let's start with the raw numbers. Total Australian household wealth hit $18.85 trillion by the end of the December 2025 quarter, according to the Australian Bureau of Statistics. By the end of the March 2026 quarter, that figure had climbed even further to $19.2 trillion. The average household now sits on a net wealth of about $1.63 million based on Finder's latest 2026 report. Sounds amazing until you realize where that money actually lives. Close to 73% of it is locked inside two things: property and superannuation. Households hold roughly $12.3 trillion in residential land and dwellings, a figure that now exceeds the combined GDP of Japan, India, and the UK. That leaves the average Australian household with about $573,252 if you remove property. Take out super as well, and it drops significantly lower. And the December 2025 quarter proved this pattern is only getting stronger. Residential land and dwellings did the heavy lifting once again, with the ABS confirming housing drove the bulk of the quarter's $453.7 billion wealth gain. Meanwhile, household borrowing continues to climb, with housing loan balance growth at its strongest level in years. So Australians are getting richer on paper, but they're also borrowing more against the very assets inflating their net worth. This is what researchers call asset-rich, cash-poor. You look wealthy on a spreadsheet, but in reality, you can't touch most of it. You can't pay your electricity bill with your house price. You can't buy groceries with your super balance, not until you retire. And the data proves most Australians aren't sitting on much cash at all. The average Australian has just $43,663 in actual savings, according to Finder's 2026 data, while the average investor holds more than double that at $92,563. Compare that to the $1.63 million headline number and the gap is staggering. The truth is, Australians have a huge amount of wealth tied up in illiquid assets. They're rich on paper, but the wealth is inaccessible unless they take out a loan against their equity, and interest rates make that expensive. Policies like negative gearing and stamp duty also play a role in driving the problem. The government incentivizes people to invest heavily in property, which pushes up prices and feeds the cycle. Meanwhile, mandatory super contributions sit at 12% of every worker's income, locked away until retirement. Now here's where it gets really interesting. When Finder's Wealth Building Report removed only the principal place of residence from the calculation, average household net wealth dropped from $1.63 million to $573,252, meaning the vast majority of Australians' millionaire status evaporates the moment you take away the house they live in. Think about that for a second. The whole identity of being a millionaire nation is built almost entirely on house prices. And house prices are exactly the kind of asset most people never sell. You live in it. You need it. It's not generating income. It's not funding your lifestyle. This is why the property obsession in Australia is a double-edged sword. Yes, it makes your net worth look impressive, but it creates a false sense of financial security. You feel wealthy because the latest property data says your house is worth $1.2 million. The average house price in Australia was just over $1.1 million during the March 2026 quarter, according to the ABS. Meanwhile, your actual investable assets, the money that can work for you, might be a fraction of that. The 2026 UBS report confirmed the picture. Australia ranks third highest in the world for median wealth at 210,783 US dollars, behind only Luxembourg and Belgium, and fifth highest globally on average wealth per adult at 616,306 US dollars. That headline strength is almost entirely built on property, and the wealth that does exist is not spread evenly. UBS also noted that Australia's Gini coefficient, a measure of wealth distribution, has actually improved to 0.53, making Australia one of the more equal wealthy nations. But that doesn't mean the average Aussie is close to the top. The top 10% of households still hold roughly 46% of all the country's wealth. So if most Australians aren't truly millionaires without their home, what separates the ones who are? The Find a Wealth Building Report 2026 found the same behaviours keep showing up. Consistent budgeting, investing frequently, and paying off debt were the top 3 drivers of wealth growth. On top of that, mature investors aged 40 plus who started investing in their 20s had an average net wealth of $1.74 million, compared to just $1 million for those who started in their 40s. Investors also carry more than double the savings of the general population, and only 2% of investors have an empty savings account, compared to 19% of everyday Australians. That gap is massive. It tells you that the real millionaires in this country have their money doing something, not just sitting inside the walls of a house. And this is the lesson. If you want to build real wealth, the kind that gives you freedom and choices, you need assets that work for you. Shares, ETFs, businesses, income-producing investments. Your home is shelter. It's important. But it's not a wealth strategy by itself. The generational data backs this up. Finder found that 57% of millennials received financial help from the bank of mum and dad, compared to just 22% of baby boomers. Younger Australians are increasingly reliant on family transfers just to get onto the property ladder in the first place. The wealth ladder is getting harder to climb, and it's happening because the entry price to Australian property keeps rising while wages barely move. Superannuation balances tell a similar story. The median super balance for someone aged 30 to 34 is around $53,000. And for those aged 50 to 54, the median has now climbed to $192,196 for men and $134,309 for women, according to the latest ATO figures. These are important numbers, but for younger Australians, they're locked away for decades. They don't help you build financial flexibility today. So here's the honest truth. Take away the family home and the vast majority of Aussie millionaires disappear from the count. If you're not in the real millionaire group yet, that's okay. But now you know the real benchmark. And you know what the people who hit it actually did. They budgeted, they invested, they eliminated debt, they started early, they built assets outside their home. That's the game. And it starts with one decision. Stop measuring your wealth by what your house is worth and start measuring it by what your money actually does. If you got value from this, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one. I'll see you there.